So I'm going to attempt to, in the next 10 minutes, give you a full understanding of what brain mapping is and how important it is to objectively measure our brain health, just like we measure our heart or any other organ in our body. Okay? So we're going to start with just a quick background on brain waves. Your brain uses brain waves to communicate different functions throughout the body. It uses the slowest brain waves. These are just under 4 hertz, which are just under 4 cycles per second, basically. These delta waves to regulate your autonomic nervous system. So these waves are going all throughout the day and night. They regulate things like sleep, your digestive system, your circulation, your hormonal regulation, immune function, all those things. The brain commands all those things and controls those throughout the day. Next are your theta waves. These are 5 to 8 hertz. These are slow waves, but they're very drowsy waves. They're fatigue type waves. They're great for daydreaming, for going to sleep, for waking up in the morning, but they're not good for thinking and processing. So we want those to be a transition wave to come up, but then to come back down to a nice normal resting state. And then you have these alpha waves that are produced, and these are nice neutral waves that allow us to calm down our brain and relax the brain, to reset after something and kind of get a hold of ourselves. And then we can be very present in the moment, but then we need to shift back into our more focused thinking, which is our beta brain waves. And beta brain waves are a little bit faster waves. These waves help us get things done, help us to focus, to concentrate, to encode memories, executive function, all those things that are about problem solving and getting things done. And then we have our high beta waves. High beta is typically more for, when there's a threat to us or when we're in our fight or flight type states, when there's urgency in a matter. And so we use each of these different frequencies or different brain waves in different amounts throughout the day as we need them. What we want, though, is each of these should come up when we need them and then come back down. They shouldn't stay stuck up high. Just like these are like gears in a car. You want them to be able to shift through those, not get stuck in producing one. If you're trying to think and concentrate and encode memories and pay attention and you have these slow theta waves stuck up high, it's like having a 40-pound backpack on when you're trying to hike. If you're trying to go to sleep at night and your beta waves or high beta waves are processing way too high, then you can't sleep. Your thoughts are just going so fast that you can't fall asleep. You can't shut down the brain to be able to, again, relax and go into those deep sleep cycles. So we want all these to increase in what's called amplitude and then come back down. This is very much like a resting heart rate. Okay? And what we're going to see is the EEG to the brain is very much like what an EKG is to the heart. We know when we measure heart health that we should have this nice resting state. It's going to increase, your heart rate's going to increase as you run or stress your heart, but it should return back to that resting state. And that's the same thing we're looking at with the brain. The brain's electrical activity, those neurons fire as you think faster, as you have urgency, as you have acute anxiety, you need to get something done, but then it should return back to a resting state. When acute anxiety turns into chronic and those brainwaves start firing all the time and they don't come back to that resting state, that becomes a problem. And that causes it's the basis of a lot of anxiety disorders. And then again, if that resting state of the brain's electrical activity becomes too low, it can cause problems too. Everything from attention disorders to memory encoding to just general sore processing, brain fog. And then we need to look at how the sleep's regulating as well. So again, what we do with an EEG is we measure the resting state of the electrical activity of the brain, very similar, like I said, to the resting state of the heart. We want it to be in this nice normal range. So this is what a brain map looks like. When we get a brain map, we do this. It's about 30 minutes of recording of electrical activity, and then it produces these brain maps, which each of those different waves I talked about, those delta waves that regulate sleep in the autonomic nervous system, those theta waves that regulate your attention and being able to transition through those theta so you can process information. Those alpha waves, which regulates our ability to just calm down and relax and be present. Those beta waves right here that are really allowing us to process information and have problem-solving abilities and executive function. And then our high beta waves, which are fight or flight waves, we don't want those to be stuck too high. We want those to be at a normal level. So when we look at a brain map, again, if we get delta waves that are stuck way too high, that means your brain, those waves that control your autonomic nervous system, is in a hypervigilant state. That can cause a lot of problems throughout the brain. That can cause problems with inflammation, where your brain can overreact to simple foods like gluten or lactose, or different foods that cause the brain. Again, the brain overreacts with inflammation, and that's the symptoms we feel. It can cause things like insomnia, where it's difficult to fall asleep or to stay asleep. The sleep cycles can be off from it. Immune system dysfunction. Things get into the system and affects those delta waves, and then it dysregulates the immune system. That immune system has to be able to heal with proper activity in the delta waves and proper sleep cycles, and things can linger for a long time if you're not really healing that immune system and maintaining it in the proper resting state. Hormonal regulation from PMS and irregular cycles can cause problems. Fatigue and brain fog, all the way to bladder sensitivity and things too. All those things are autonomic nervous system, and typically so many people come and say, I've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, I've been diagnosed with adrenal fatigue and all these things, where typically it's the delta waves. They're putting too much stress across the body, and those will affect the thyroid, those will affect the adrenals, those will affect sleep, those will cause brain fog, those will cause all those things. So we need to be looking at the brain activity that controls all those things and looking to see if there's a dysregulation in those. Also, as far as sleep cycles, you have to get into the deepest level of sleep, that non-REM sleep, to allow the vascular system of the brain to slightly shrink down, and it allows the cerebral spinal fluid to come through the brain and basically cleanse the brain from the toxins and the regular metabolic waste, which includes plaques that build up during the day. Your brain, as it's in normal use, will produce a certain amount of plaque. But in deep sleep, it should come through, the cerebral spinal fluid comes through and removes that, cleanses that out. So if we're not getting into deep sleep cycles, we're not getting rid of that plaque, and that plaque's starting to accumulate and build up, which can cause a lot of problems in the long term, decade after decade, towards things like dementia and Alzheimer's disease, but also in the short term, things like memory and brain fog and attention issues and all those type of things can occur from poor sleep cycles. And then we go to those theta waves. If we see that your theta waves are stuck too high, again, that's like having a 40-pound backpack on as you're trying to accomplish things like focus and attention. This is very typical in attention disorders, where there's too much theta right over the attention network, which stops you from processing information. It's slowing down your ability to process information. It's putting pressure. It's fatigue waves. It's slow, sleepier type waves right over your attention network. And it makes it very difficult with executive functions, with attention, with all these type of things, working memory, planning, all these functions. And then we have alpha waves. So alpha waves are great to bring up when we're meditating or we're being very present in the moment, we're relaxing for a little bit, then they should go back down, and we should progress into problem solving and getting things done. We wouldn't get much done if we were in this meditative state all day long. And that's what happens when the brain comes up into that alpha and stays stuck up there. It stays stuck in a neutral state. And when you're in that neutral state, everything seems overwhelming. It can cause depression, overwhelming anxiety, lower motivation. The brain's just stuck in that neutral. And what we tend to do is start withdrawing from things because it seems so overwhelming and too much work to do something or to meet with this group of people or to do a new project. And so we just withdraw from it, which causes the lack of engagement and slower processing overall. And then our beta waves. Our beta waves should come up as we need them, but then they should come back down as we get done and we relax our brain. We want to, it's like working out a muscle. We want to flex it as we pick something up, but then relax it as we let it recover. And same thing as we're working, we're getting things done, we're processing, we're problem solving, those beta waves are fine to be up. But at night, when we're trying to go to sleep, when we're relaxing, we need to be able to bring those back down so our brain doesn't stay in these loops and get stuck and not, and we need to be able to shut down our brain and give it the recovery it needs so that we have the energy and stuff to go the next day. So it can cause things like anxiety, it can cause obsessive thinking loops and compulsive tendencies, all the way to addictive behavior, excess worry. And then it can cause physical things like migraines and headaches, teeth grinding, where those temporal lobes are just putting so much pressure across the jaw all night long and constricting those muscles. And it can cause that teeth grinding and TMJ and jaw clenching, things like that. And then it does the same thing in the neck and the muscles in the back. A lot of people that have this can go get a massage and it feels great for about 1 hour, and then it constricts all back, the neck and the back. And that's because the activity in the brain is constricting it. It's not relaxing. And then we can also see the form of the fight or flight waves, which are your high beta waves, and which is very typical to get stuck in things like post-traumatic stress. So when there's been intense stress over a period of time or a very specific traumatic event that happened, that can cause things like panic attacks and aggression and anger and rage and fear, addictive behaviors where you just can't turn off the brain. And different things can trigger it as well.